You know, like I said, when women walk in your house and sneer at because your house is messed up and stuff like that, it just kind of hits me funny, because then it's like I'm supposed to be doing everything for everybody else, and it's kind of how this situation turned out. I was doing everything for everybody else, and I was getting no love in return. So those things don't work. And so even though I asked them to leave, they were like, well, they were telling me that pretty much I had to force them out, and wasn't something I wanted to do, and they were counting on it, that my good personality. I'm not saying I'm a totally good person, but they were taking advantage of me, and they knew it. They knew they had a good thing going, and once I had them figured out, then I had to put my foot down because I couldn't do it anymore. They were driving me in a bad direction, because they were doing it to themselves, but they were helping me out to do it because they were looking at me like they look at themselves. And that was the situation with all three individuals that I had helped. And the one thing that came out of all those relationships with people that weren't marriage oriented or girlfriend oriented, was that they could clearly see the difference between a good person and a bad person. Now, even when I was married twice, but I didn't know enough to marry somebody that was more like me. I didn't know. You know, I'm trying to work the spiritual thing out, and I didn't have it quite worked out, because I had to have a lot of help from God to do that. And I don't mean that it's my imagination either, because I literally had to be shown. But in those two relationships, they pretty much wanted to do whatever, and they did kind of the same thing to me. There's people out there that most everybody, their viewpoints onto themselves and their problems. They can't view life beyond that. And whoever's in their lives are going to have that same thing happen to them, because they can't get beyond their own selves. So that will cause them envy and strife. And then within their families comes out all the different forms of evil. So you have to be careful when you're trying to help others out, because of those bad examples right there. It's a hard knock life. Not that I ever liked Annie, but Annie kind of reminded me of my sister, and I never really cared much for my sister. Because it's how you get treated, you know. And the good thing that came out of all those different relationships is that they could clearly, beyond a shadow of a doubt, see that there wasn't anything in it for me. What I wanted, they couldn't give me. They couldn't return the love. That is what they could clearly see, each and every one of them. And then when they because they got the idea into their heads that they were all important, and then I became dirt. As soon as they got what they wanted out of life, I became dirt. And so did everything I owned became dirt. That's how they treated it. They pretty much brushed their feet off on the doormat as they were going out the door. And that's not love. That's selfishness. And that's a type of envy, and that's a type of strife they caused themselves by what they wanted out of life. They couldn't see past themselves to see what somebody else wanted. And if all of somebody wants is love, then why couldn't you give it to them? It's a good question. So the bottom line is that you can't help anybody, unfortunately. So then I came up with a system that is supposed to work. I've been trying to make it work, but I'm still in with other people that want to do things their way, but at least they're aiming, in a good direction. How it's going to turn out, only the future will tell. But the system is keep your kids from influence. Before you get married, make sure that you have your house paid for. Make sure you got a job. Make sure you got money in the bank. Make sure your car's paid for. That way, you are not worried. It's pre-existing. You took care of yourself. You showed you could love yourself. It's pre-existing. So depending on where you live, some people, like I said, because of how the laws are set up, they actually create more evil from that. It's bad enough they don't want you to own anything, and it's a rent society, but you can overcome it if you do those certain things. But if where you're at and you get married and your wife automatically gets half of everything because that's the state laws, then you should move. But if it's pre-existing, like where I'm at, they can't touch it. They can think they can get a court order, they can throw you out, because there are some people that are like that. They'll see what you got, they'll think it's a shortcut. And then while they're in your house, they'll go through everything you got, and you should automatically go through and take pictures of everything and put it in the safety deposit box somewhere where you know it's going to be safe. And if you have pictures of it, receipts for everything, then, because I've seen it where a woman will look at the guy and go, well, I own you now. Everything that you have and everything you ever will have is going to be mine. And they actually will think that. There are some really bad people out there, and because they can't do it for themselves, or they don't want to do it for themselves, or they don't know how to do it. And but in the end, when it's all done and said, because it's pre-existing, they won't be able to take it from you. They will have to move. And it's only during the time that you were married that if there's any assets at the end of that do you have to split. So, they don't take into account that what was I saying? Of the bills that you got to pay. It's just whatever you've accumulated. So if you have like a 401k and you've earned $10,000 during that period, they will try to credit her 5. So it's better that she tries to take care of herself because it balances the checkbook, and that way everything cancels out. Because like if you bought another car and that car is there, then the 2 cars cancel each other out because she's getting one. So if you want to protect yourself being a male, you have to look at the evils that are there and why they're caused. Not everybody should look at you like you're a paycheck. And why they would think that in the first place, I don't know. That's too bad. So since all that, I really, when I look at it, it's deeply hurt by it. Now that I kind of grasp life for what it really is, when it talks about patience, long suffering, and stuff like that in the Bible, don't think those are the situations they were talking about. I think it's more inwarded. I think when you read the Bible and you're looking at the Bible, they're talking about a closed-knit group of people. How you deal with your neighbor kind of thing. Because it's mostly Ten Commandment based, and that was group based. They're really not concerned so much with anybody outside the group. I think that's the envy and strife that the world looks at. That, because when they're pointing fingers and blaming certain groups for things, then they're not seeing the inside of it. Because they want to claim that they're part of that, but they're not acting like they're part of that. So if they're not acting like they're part of that, they're probably not a part of that. So I hope you gleaned something from what I said about the world and the people around you, because the whole thing is to protect yourself from them. Not to protect everybody else from what they're doing to themselves. You protect yourself from them, and you look at the group thing. If you're part of a group, then you need to see the envy and the strife, because if that's there, even if it's not a part of you, and you're trying to do everything right, it can be a part of another individual. And they will have a hard time seeing what they're seeing, because they have a bad view on love. And a lot of them get it from early in age, because I think I've talked about this before, where they'll make those decisions when they're young. About 3 or 4, they make a decision, because I think the firstborns are like more family-pointed individuals. They will just do things more out of love for mom and dad and everybody. But it's the second and the third and the fourth. Then unless you're right on top of it, you're keeping from the outside influences outside the family, because television, school are like some of the 2 worst things that you can put your kids in, because the outlooks they're going to get from other people and what they want to be like. But the first one is the most important one, because that sets the standard for all the other life decisions. Because when it's the preschool age, and I don't recommend preschool just because of that. The first decision, how they're going to get what they want out of life, is the most important one. And if a child sees that too much into what other people view, and they decide to do something that's evil instead, like, I'm going to lie because that's the only way I can get what I want, or I'm going to steal because that's the only thing I'm going to get what I want. And then when they're 14 or 15 and they make that second choice, because it's about every 10 years, and it reinforces the one before it. So one decision is based on the next. Then you want to definitely, especially to the age 21, you want to keep your children away from those influences as much as possible, especially during those couple of year influences. And like I said, setting the example is the best thing you can do for your family, because it's not going to be what you say, it's going to be what you do. And when they become confused and they're trying to reinvent the wheel, and then they're not going by what you're telling them. They're trying to reinvent the wheel because there's something there that dishonored you in front of them, and I already said what that was. Because you're supposed to be the one that knows more than they do, and that's not supposed to happen. So if they will tend to want to do what you do, but you have to really limit them to what they can do. I can say, you can tell me that it's on the individual, but I don't see it, and I haven't seen it, because there's good people out there and bad ones. But from experience, I do know these things. So I hope it helped you out in some way. And I got to learn to make these videos shorter. It's just too much information, and I should be writing it down and breaking it into different videos, which is probably what I'm going to do. Is I'm probably going to go back through the videos. I'm going to remake them and delete them. It'll give me something to do, and plus my ratings will go up and stuff like that. So I hope this helped you out. Enjoy life, and I'll see you next time.